welcome to Clarksburg High School. I'm Eric Hershey, the student member of the board. We're here today for another Student Conversations. Right now we're talking about mental health. It's a continuing conversation within our student body. I hear it more and more as I go out to schools. Students are talking about their own mental well-being, the effect that adults have on their mental well-being, and the impact that school has on their mental health. We also see it more in the national dialogue, whether it's through policies or through other conversations that we seem to have in an increasing frequency. So thanks again to Dr. Jack Smith, our superintendent, for being with us today, and for all of our students at Clarksburg for joining us. And let's get right to the questions.
Hi, my name is Michael, and do you think that MCPS employees have enough training to help children with mental illnesses?
Hi, Michael. I think we have 23,000 employees, and that variation across 23,000 employees is probably pretty significant. I'm pretty confident that we need to do both more as we prepare teachers and educators, and also as they progress through their career. Because I started teaching in 1980 as a middle and high school English teacher. And so if I had spent from 1980 until today in the classroom and never had additional learning and exposure to mental health questions about what students are dealing with today as opposed to 1980, I wouldn't be very well prepared. And I'm afraid we don't do that systematically enough with all current employees and as we prepare future employees. And it needs to happen not just with principals and teachers, but with all of our support professionals too, because they literally interact with students every day on buses, in offices, in cafeterias. And so I think it's a very important change that we need to make in the way we approach preparation to work in a school system.
It's a good question. So what training currently do our employees receive?
Employees receive, if they're going to become a teacher or a principal, they take a series of courses. But once again, if courses don't prepare you both to know the academic information and to apply it, if you just know it, but you don't have the skills to apply what you've learned, then it's not very helpful to the students. And then once you become a teacher or a principal, or in some cases a support professional, then you get a series of very discrete training, like around identification of child abuse, identification of students who are at risk of suicide or harming themselves, identification of students who are at risk of being engaged in gang activities, those sorts of things. And all of those are good, and they all are worthwhile and should be a part of what we do. But I think it has to be broader than that, because the mass number of students, those three things I just named don't apply to you. But other things, like being stressed out by the amount of schoolwork you have, like trying to balance whatever challenges you have in your life against the school day requirements, that's more typical, and we don't do a lot with that.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Do you think students have enough awareness of their resources when they feel they're struggling with their mental health?
No, I don't. And I think it's often something that we don't want to bring up as students or adults. And so we feel hesitant to even ask what are the resources. And so we could do a more comprehensive job as educators to make sure students and parents know what the resources are, and then make sure that they feel comfortable asking about getting those resources and making them available.
So it's a great question, because here's an example that I do all the time. So, or that I talk about all the time. We have a number of psychologists in our system, and other school systems have deployed those more or deployed those differently than we do. I believe our model is they sort of roam around from school to school. For instance, in Fairfax County across the river, they're actually in schools. Does anybody know how to access a psychologist in our school system if they were to need one? So that's an example that I talk about all the time, because even as we have an increased number of psychologists and we continue to budget for them, students don't really know how to access them, and that's something I continue to hear from peers. So it's a very good question. Yeah.
I actually had a question about the school psychologist. I'm Fiona. I was like, how can the school psychologist be like more available / like to students? Because I know like some students don't even know we have a school psychologist because she's kind of like in the back of the school.
I think we need to build awareness, and I think we should do that in the places where you look, so that announcements and information is put out in a regular fashion. Like we put out announcements about tryouts for sports. We put out announcements about PTA meetings. But those sorts of things are not advertised, and we should advertise them. And we should also help people understand that, a school psychologist is going to be available to you if you need to see them. But if you need more long-term intensive care, that's a person who can work with you and your family to help direct you to that more long-term care too. And so we need to make that very routine, where the information is just available all the time. And we need to make sure that we don't set people up to believe that you're going to get, really intensive therapy at school, because you're not. And you spend about 12% of your time between age 5 and age 18 in school. And so it's just helping people really understand what is available, and then how do you access beyond that, beyond the school, because the health department here in Montgomery County has tremendous services too. And I would say most people know even less about that than they know about school services. And that is more available and more intensive.
I'm Ziva, and do you think that like the health curriculum that we have at school does a good job of bringing awareness to these issues and various issues that people can have? Because I know depression and things like that, but there's so many other things that can count as mental illness, or that you could have but not know how to properly deal with because you don't have the right education on it.
I think it provides the good academic background and information. It probably doesn't provide some of the things we were just talking about in the helping people who are hesitant to ask for help, helping people to understand that there's, experiencing depression is just like experiencing the chicken pox. It's a health-related problem. It's not better, it's not worse, it's a different kind. And all too often we think of health and social emotional struggles as somehow or another being less desirable than the chicken pox. And we shouldn't think of it that way. We should just understand that our mental health is connected to our physical health and our sense of well-being, and that it's okay to ask. We probably don't do enough of that, of making sure that people understand it's good to ask, it's good to say I need help, it's good to say I need resources, what are the resources available? Those are good things.
Asking adults asking students, or students asking adults, or
both? Both.
Hi, I'm Anna, and as an upperclassman, I feel like it's more and more common for kids to have anxiety and developmental illnesses with everything that's going on. And not only at school, not only AP exams and AP classes and SATs and ACTs and worrying about college, but they also have a home life. And obviously teachers aren't as fully aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering just, what do you think we should do about that?
Well, one of the things I think we should do, and I think we're probably moving toward this, but one of the big shifts that we've all experienced is social media. And 20 years ago, it was not an issue. And so it's not by any means the only challenge or the only thing that causes stress and causes anxiety, but it's part of what caused it, as well as just electronic information coming at us. And so I think you're the first generation that's kind of been fully engaged in it. You don't really remember much of life without Facebook and tweets, and I remember we had a telephone called a party line. Do you even know what that is? When you picked up the telephone in our home, you could hear other people talking, because there were 4 houses along our road that all used the same telephone line because we had one. So if you heard someone talking, you hung up the phone, and then 10 minutes later you would check to see if they were still talking. So if I wanted to get information, I went to the encyclopedia in the public library or my school library. So I had a real lack of information and a lack of access to everything going on in the world. You are overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed. And I think what we have to figure out in schools and in families and our society is self-regulation. People, no matter what topic it is, you can stay consumed 24 hours a day online with that topic. Information about it, people's opinions about it, pros and cons about it, people being hateful about it, people being loving toward it. You can get people who will just, I said, earlier I made a reference about, if you say this, then I'll get emails. You know that. If you put something out, you'll get a response. So self-regulation, something schools should pay attention to, families should pay attention to, everybody in our society, so that you're not allowing yourself to be consumed by anything. It's your choice, not external choice. I think we could do a lot in that area.
Yeah, and even in high school, I feel like as high schoolers, we're even a bit behind where if you have younger brothers and sisters, and I don't, but I know because we hear a lot of things on the board is that we see even more. I mean, what these middle schoolers and even elementary schoolers are doing with social media is just absurd and unhealthy, frankly.
So I know I don't know if it's the whole MCPS, but I know around here they blocked Instagram and Snapchat for a while. So is it to regulate that? How we're still interconnected, or is it just for school purposes, we don't want you to be distracted in class?
I have no idea. So I have to tell you a funny story. Yesterday, I was at another high school in the system, and a student actually grabbed my sleeve and said, "Oh, Dr. Smith, thank you for unblocking Snapchat." And I said, "You're welcome." And I thought, I have no idea what he's talking about, but I'm not going to tell him that in the middle of this hallway. So I don't know. I mean, most of it typically is all about security, system security, because all of the information about you, your grades, your life, all the employees' information is in there. And so I don't know the answer to that. I bet we can find it out for you, though, and get it back to you. So we'll send it back.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Emily. I was just wondering, what does MCPS provide for students who haven't been diagnosed with a mental health issue?
What do we provide for students who haven't been diagnosed? Well, I think it's the more general things that you're aware of. Counselors in the office that do both counseling and guidance. Guidance being what courses should you take and what do you want to do after high school, those things. And guidance being for social emotional challenges or relationship challenges. And then I think the other thing that we do is we have a lot of educators in every school, and many of them are very skillful. One of the things that we used to do in a high school where I was principal is have a program called Natural Helpers, where students would identify, this was in Washington State, identify other students and adults who were just naturally good at helping us when we had a problem, when we just needed to talk. They were confidential, they were respectful, they took us seriously. And then we would use that information to continue to enhance those people's skills, because they can really change the culture of a school. And I think we could do a lot more of those sorts of informal things, because most of what you do is come to school, go through your courses, do your work, go to lunch, do the rest of your courses, and then either go to sports, activities, drama, band, whatever, and then go home and then do all the other things you do in your life. So in terms of time for that, there's not a lot of time, but there are a lot of people. And if those people are good resources, a lot of it gets solved interpersonally in relationships, and we could do better with that, of setting that up.
It's a great point, and I think that many of us have adults in the building whom we can talk to about various things just based on personal relationships or a particular connection, but there are also a lot of students who don't have that adult or that connection, and perhaps they also don't have those connections at home, so it becomes harder for them to just have somebody to talk to or confide about what, whether it's school related or something else, and to channel resources.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Kaylee, and we've been talking a lot about how to help students deal with mental illness, but how do you think we can prevent this in the first place? If we go back to the stress and anxiety from schoolwork mixed with, everything that's going on, you have all these activities or whatever's at home, how can we help students not get to that place in the in the first place?
I think it goes back to two things I've said earlier and how we put them together. making sure that adults are helping students think and talk about the relative importance and the relative significance of things in people's lives, so that we talk with students very honestly and openly about that. And teaching students and teaching adults about self-regulation, how you think. The way we talk to ourselves is one of the primary things that allows us to regulate what happens. I mean, you know, you think about that, and let's just think of it a specific example. So, I read back in, and I'm not a big football fan, although I did follow, I went to a couple of the state championships for Montgomery County because I was so excited that we were doing so well. But I read...
There's a big Clarksburg-Damascus rivalry,
I know,
so we might not
so I don't want to talk
mention
about that. But I read back in the fall that there were two teams, and one was Seattle, and the other one I don't remember which one it was, but it doesn't matter. Both teams lost a really important game because the kicker missed a field goal. They both lost. The coach, I can't remember, and I really don't remember, we could Google it and find out. He said, that kicker gets paid to do that. He messed up, it's his fault, we're mad, and I don't know if we're gonna get over it. The Seattle coach said, he's a great kicker, he kicked successfully throughout the game. He happened to miss the kick that we needed in order to win this game. We wish he had made it, but he's one of us and we love him. And that's a quote right out of the article. Do you hear the difference in those two statements? We need to be so much more like this as educators and as people, and so much less like this. And I think no matter what you think about, and I think it's okay for students to call adults on this. I mean, I used to direct school plays, and I would get intense. Okay, we got to get this right, you know, everybody. I didn't scream at people or throw chairs or anything. I wanted good relationships with them. But it's okay for the student, you know, to say, we're going to get this right, coach, teacher, director. It's going to be okay. But we need to all just take a breath. And I think the more we can have adults that model that, the more students will feel comfortable and like that's a really good way to think about life. And we don't do enough of that, because whatever it is we do, we think is most important, and we keep push. Get into college, I gotta get into college. There are 4,000 colleges in this country. The vast majority of them are non-competitive. You can walk in and enroll right now. And you can go on and get a PhD from Harvard or be president of the United States and having gone to one of those non-competitive colleges. And that's the truth.
So a few years ago, I think it was in 2013, the board adopted they call it the strategic planning framework, which is kind of like what the district believes are the things that students should really know. And one of the 3 competencies that we adopted was social emotional learning, which tried to elevate the role that things like self-regulation, asking questions about who we are, do we know each other, how do we deal with certain things, how do we have a sense of empathy, or how do we put ourselves in others' shoes? And obviously that was after we were out of elementary school. Most of us were in middle school or high school then. But I guess part of the question is, what role does early learning have in that, and what does elementary school look like today, and how are we inculcating those abilities within our students?
Well, I absolutely think that, you know, reading and writing and arithmetic are critically important, and we have to pay attention to them in pre-K and K and 1 and 2 and 3. But integrated into that ought to be a lot more conversation with children about self-regulation, about how we talk to ourselves, about how we think about what we're learning. Talking about how I think about something with me helps me. It helps me, the technical term for it is metacognition, thinking about my own thinking. How did I arrive at that answer? Why did I know that? Why don't I know that? What do I really believe about this? And too often we say, well, kids aren't ready for that until 5th grade or 8th grade or 10th grade. That's nonsense. Students are ready at very young ages to have meaningful conversations. We need to do a lot more of it. And that'll require a lot more preparation of teachers and educators to do that skillfully.
And what's the crossroads between traditional academic development and those skills?
Well, we all construct meaning in our heads. So if you think to yourself, you know, this is too hard, I can't do this, you won't be able to do it. So academic information and learning is constructed inside your head, your understanding of a topic. You know, you've all been in class where the teacher, you've made a comment or asked a question, the teacher's come to a dead stop like, and wow, that's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard, because you constructed a new way of thinking about something that the teacher had not come across before, in a novel, in a science experiment. And that's what you're doing, you're constructing meaning. We can help young children construct both academic meaning and interpersonal relationship meaning. And we can do more of that. If you read the book 30 Million Words by Dana Susskind out of the University of Chicago, it's fascinating when you look at what happens to the brain between 0 and age 5 and how much meaning children construct out of the language that goes on in those early years.
Great. Is there another question? Any other thoughts?
I just want to say I would like to be your teacher. It would be so much fun to be in a classroom with you guys and get a chance to hear what you think and have a conversation with you every day about some important idea and way of thinking. And so really, really appreciate the chance to talk with you.
Thanks to everybody for joining us here today at Clarksburg High School. We had a great discussion about mental health, its role in our schools, both from the beginning of the school year until the end of high school, and it's going to continue to play an important role in our lives as students, and it's going to continue to be of the utmost importance for our administrators,
Absolutely.
both in our schools and in our districts. So thanks for joining us today.